Well, colleagues, hello and welcome to this next session of KYRA Connect. As you know, we're trying to give you some information each week through our bulletin of just things to sort of view your mind on, add to those ever-growing to-do lists and open up some conversations about things that are coming up. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Sam Twiselton with us today. Sam's going to come and have a conversation with me really about the early career framework. Hopefully you will have seen in the bulletin a couple of weeks ago, I gave you just sort of a 10-15 minute video about some things that you might want to begin to consider, particularly in kind of systems and processes, timetabling, funding, all of those bits and pieces that are going on. But we're really conscious that there is so much information at the moment, and the early career framework, as I mentioned in the video and as you will know, is being rolled out in September, and we want you to be as prepared and ready, not only in terms of your structure, but also to welcome in our early career teachers and ensure that we're giving them the very, very best start and support. So Sam, thank you so much for joining me this morning on this sort of grey and Lincoln sort of day. I don't know what it's like for you, but I'm really, really grateful for your time. Just before we recorded this, I said, for those of you that follow Sam on Twitter will know that she mixes her day up between Microsoft Teams and Zoom at the moment, don't you? So, Sam, so it's a busy old time, and we're really grateful for you giving your time to us. Sam, do you want to just give me a bit of background in terms of your role and sort of why I've asked you to come and have this conversation with us?
Of course, and thank you for asking me to talk about my favourite subject. I love talking about teacher development, and it's a really exciting time for teacher development. It's grey in Sheffield as well.
Yeah.
Compared to yesterday, it was lovely and sunny. Yeah, so I mean, I come to this from a number of different angles, really. I suppose for this conversation, probably the most important one is that I chair the advisory group for the DfEs ITT core content framework, and that arises from me also sitting on the advisory group for the DfEs teacher recruitment and retention strategy group, and the two obviously very, very closely linked, as is the early career framework. And one of the things that's great about a number of things that are happening right now is that they are all linked up, and they are potentially therefore creating a much more kind of coherent system for early career teachers, but actually for all teachers, hopefully, with the NPQs coming on board as well. I also sit in the advisory group for that. There's a whole set of things coming in that I think should create a much more sort of seamless sense of progression right through from ITT really to throughout somebody's career, whatever pathway they want to take, but with a big focus on that early career phase, which we know to be really, really important. And we do know also we've had a problem there, that we've had a lot of teachers leaving very early on in their career, and that's obviously a problem for them, and it's a problem for the system. So I feel like the DfE is at last doing something really sensible about that in the form of the various initiatives that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, talking to colleagues over the last few months, particularly with lockdowns and the pressures that our ITT colleagues have had and our NQTs currently, it has been such a disruptive couple of years for their experience within their schools. And although we didn't know about what was coming this year when this was coming to place, I think the timing of it ready for September is just perfect in terms of really supporting our early career teachers after such a difficult few years.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it wasn't planned with a global pandemic in mind, but knowing what this year has been like, and I have to say I've been really actually impressed by both trainees and ITT providers, and indeed the mentors who've been supporting them, because they've made the very best they could out of a really difficult situation. And I think, we've developed resilience, we've developed flexibility, we've developed a real deep empathy with pupils and teachers as a result of all of that. But inevitably there will be gaps, there will be probably quite a few NQTs starting in September who will feel a lack of confidence because they haven't been physically in front of children as much as they would have been. It's always a bit scary in September, actually, however long you've been a teacher, that knowing that you've got to establish those routines, those relationships, all those things about the classroom environment which makes learning sort of happen. They're bound to feel that they need some help with that. And I think the early career framework will help, but it's not just that, it's the fact it's prompting conversations like this. It's just making schools think a little bit more. I mean, many schools have been doing this for years anyway, but it's kind of really shining a light on the need to really think carefully about the needs of early career teachers, and make sure that the school, or even the collection of schools, sort of wrap themselves around their needs in the same way that they'll be wrapping themselves around the pupils' needs. Yeah. And I think, you know, the early career framework will definitely help with that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And colleagues listening today may remember, it seems a long time ago now, but October 2019, Sam came and spoke to a group of colleagues at a roundtable event, really about some of the barriers, as Sam has talked about today, about recruitment and retention of our early career teachers. And that's why I think so many of us are really excited about the early career framework. I know it was talked about at the roundtable event, and somehow we're almost there now in terms of the rollout of it. So I feel that people are beginning to get prepared and ready for that. Sam, you've touched on it a little bit in terms of it's your favourite subject to talk about in terms of teacher development and bits and pieces like that. Obviously, we've talked about the fact that we have got an issue in terms of recruitment and retention. Can you summarise why you are so excited and hopeful about the early career framework and its rollout in September?
Okay, so you might have to shut me up at this point because we can go on about this forever. I mean, there's so many different things. I think we start with the framework itself. The fact that that latches into the thing that I've been most involved in, which is the ITT framework, and that's been implemented this year. So this year's trainees have benefited from a framework which really closely mirrors what they'll then get as an NQT and an RQT from next year. They work together as closely as possible to create a seamless as possible kind of minimum of 3 years ongoing support and development, if you include the ITT year. Obviously, for some people, it will be longer if they've done an undergraduate route, and some people get longer at the other end as well, because many good trusts and alliances, I think KYRA is a really good example of this, will continue to support and develop people beyond that RQT year. But the fact that we've got this real focus on support and development in that first 2 really crucial years, not only is it going to give those teachers the additional support that they'll need, and it'll give them a little bit of time away from the classroom to reflect, to stand back, to just remind themselves of that bigger picture, because the research that the DfE did in terms of why so many teachers were leaving the profession so early highlighted that everybody tends to come in for a similar set of reasons, which is about making a difference, and that bigger picture understanding of the difference that education can make to young people's lives. And I think what they found, particularly talking to people who had left, or people who had thought about leaving and then something had happened that persuaded them to stay, it was the ones who'd left that felt completely disconnected from the bigger picture. You know, they felt that what they were stressed about, what was taking up all their time, was not about transforming lives. It was about data entry or triple marking or whatever. And the ones who had thought about leaving and didn't, very often it was because they changed schools. And they went to a school where actually it can be about that big picture. Yes, there are certain admin things that we have to do, but they're deprioritized compared to the bigger picture of what brought us into the profession in the first place. And what I'm noticing is, you know, like I said just now, it started a national conversation. So as well as the actual thing that they'll get through attending whichever version of the early career framework their employer sort of sends them on, I think they're coming into a context where the sector has woken up to the fact that, and I think the global pandemic has actually really helped with this, that we need to put that sense of moral purpose front and centre again. And so therefore we need to be talking to our early career teachers. In fact, we need to be talking to all teachers about how we make sure we stay true to that. And that does mean decluttering, maybe getting rid of some of the things that were getting in the way previously. So a really exciting time. I recognise for school leaders initially it might seem there's a bit of hassle attached to this, because there is. You know, you said that in your video that you've already made, there's things like timetabling to think about, there's mentor release time, there's mentor training. You know, there are things that you just can't deny it, add to the things that senior leaders have to deal with at a time when they're dealing with so many things already. But I think it's worth it, because you will hold on to those early career teachers. They will continue to get better. It's a single thing that you can do, that you can control, that can make a big impact on the quality of outcomes for your children is supporting and developing your teachers. So hopefully in the long run, it's worth what might seem like a little bit of short-term hassle.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. I think, there are some significant changes for everybody to get heads around and kind of understand and appreciate. But I think, as you say, the long-term impact and effects that will have, just talking from those simplicity things of retention and recruitment, that actually this is going to have a direct impact into and speaking into those challenges that we're facing. I think for the, as you say, the additional work and potential feeling of hassle towards it will completely outweigh in the long term. And that's, that's what's really exciting. I also think what an exciting time to be an early career teacher. We have seen in the last 12 months how people have responded and realised once again the importance of relationship and working with colleagues and how can we problem solve and how can we respond to this. And actually for our ITT early career colleagues to have had the last couple of years of experience, which, let's not sort of quieten down, it's been a challenge for them, but to be going into it with that experience and with these changes and reforms that have been put into place, I feel really hopeful for our early career colleagues.
Absolutely, and that kind of builds on the point I made that I think the way the system has sort of stepped up to that challenge has been really beneficial to trainees. I'm sure it must have been stressful for them, and it must have been stressful for their mentors. But exactly what you said, the fact that we've been in sort of problem solving together mode, and nobody's ever faced these kind of situations before. So in some ways that puts trainees, and this will continue when they're early career teachers, into sort of being more like equal members of a team who are kind of working it out as they go along.
Yeah.
And I think that's great, as long as at the same time they get that additional, more structured support from the early career framework. You've got a brilliant balance there, of feeling like you're a team member and that you're making a big contribution, but it's also accepted and acknowledged that you're still learning and that you need extra support and help. Yeah. And also I think it's great for mentors. It's a wonderful time to be a mentor, again accepting what we just said about a little bit of hassle for school leaders in terms of making sure they've got the right release time and so on, but once that's in place, first of all their role is really acknowledged and celebrated, as it should be, because it's so pivotal. But actually being a mentor is actually brilliant for the mentors themselves in terms of their own practice. And so that also means the school benefits, because you've got a lot more people thinking reflectively about how to deconstruct their own practice so they can make it visible for others. And in doing that, actually getting better at it themselves. So yeah, an exciting time all round, I think.
Absolutely. You've mentioned there the pivotal role of the mentor, and for those of us that have been involved maybe in the sort of early rollout or expansion, we have been introduced to that, really about that significant role. Sam, can you talk to me about why you think the mentor role is so vital, and for school leaders currently considering next year timetabling staffing, when they're thinking about a mentor to work with an early career colleague, what sort of skills do you think that mentor needs to have so far? We appreciate they're going to get some more training, but considering, which members of staff should we be choosing within our schools? What skills do you think are really relevant to this role?
Yeah, well, first of all, where it's possible, and I know this isn't always possible in really small schools, although I know some really small schools actually in Lincolnshire have got over that by working together. But where it's possible, try not to think just in terms of the individuals, but try and think in terms of a team approach and a mentoring culture within the school, so that you have more than one person who's doing the role. Maybe you have somebody who has oversight of it all, but that you've got a group of people who are doing it. Because one of the key things, certainly we've said in the core content framework, but I think it equally applies to the early career framework, is that a mentor, yes, is a source of support and wisdom and expertise for the mentee, but they also can't think that they should be the answer to every problem that early career teacher needs to solve, and they should be a facilitator of access to the broader expertise that's available within the school or even across a group of schools. And this is what I mean about a school wrapping itself around the early career teacher. There will be a Senko, there will be a head of phase or a head of department. There will be the pastoral lead who knows how to deal with that autistic child. You know, there'll be a whole group of different people who are for different times, different aspects of the framework or different things that have just arisen in the day-to-day experience of the early career teacher, that are the perfect person to give that person the support. And it's not always the mentor.
Yeah.
Having said that, what the mentor needs to be able to do is have that kind of empathy with the point of development that the early career teacher is at, but enough knowledge and enough wisdom to know how to challenge them and move them on, so that they don't just kind of get stuck in that place. Which is why I think often a group approach can work, because sometimes having somebody in that group who is themselves fairly early on in their career can perform one really useful function. You know, somebody can really empathise. Oh, this time last year I was where you are now, and it does get better. And you know, November's always hard, but by April you're feeling like you know what you're doing, sort of thing. But that, I don't think it's good for a mentee to just have somebody in that role. I think you also need somebody who's got more experience under the belt. So ideally, you have a combination of different kinds of types of expertise, which usually means a set of different people, which again, I recognise is more complicated for schools to facilitate, but in the end, does make for a better all-round sort of balanced kind of approach.
Absolutely. No, totally agree with that. That's brilliant. You've talked, I love that phrase of wrapping the school community, wrapping themselves around those early career teachers. You know, thinking back really fondly to my NQT year, I very much had that kind of wraparound support. It just felt completely supported, loved, challenged in a really healthy way about kind of my progress, really. What do you think, as colleagues, as you know, a group of Lincolnshire schools, that we can do as a community to really support our early career teachers? What do we need to do in terms of our ethos, our behaviours, our attitudes? How can we create that really wraparound supportive culture for our early career teachers?
Well, to a large extent, carry on doing what you're doing. When I came along back in that October 2019, I was so impressed with what felt like a group of really committed leaders who were already very used to working together in a highly collaborative way. And I think that's really important that you continue to do that. But then you think about that, how that plays out specifically for your early career teachers. And again, I know you've got lots of things to build on that you've already been doing for a long time here. But, you know, things like having the networks, so that there's opportunities for those early career teachers to support each other as well as get support from the schools that they're in. And that, you know, may have to be done remotely like this. Ideally, there'll also be some face-to-face opportunities for people to get together and interact. And, you know, there's different dimensions to that. A challenge in places where there's a lot of small schools can be, how do you make sure that there's enough support for subject knowledge, for example? You know, I can remember I started my career in a mixed age class, small primary school, and right as an NQT, I had to take on, you know, subject leader role, and I felt so unconfident about that. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what you would want your NQT to be in that position, but you do want them to be able to be actively developing their subject knowledge. And I think having networks across the county to help with that would be something that I would suggest that you do. I think just being really conscious about what expertise is available across the group of schools and signposting it for the mentors as well as for the early career teachers, so that they know, you know, the great things that are going on. It might not be in their school, it might be in the school down the road, but that school down the road is usually really happy to be asked if they can help with something. And it really helps getting the teachers out and about. Like you, I was in a fantastic situation when I was an NQT, and my head teacher, you know, on a weekly basis, most Fridays I was either attending some kind of NQT development or I was visiting other people's schools, and both were equally helpful, just in terms of giving that slightly broader perspective. Because I think, particularly in the intensity of those first couple of years, and again, especially if you're in a smaller school, it can seem quite sort of intense and narrow, your world, and it's good every now and then to be able to step outside of that and see different contexts and different ways of doing things.
And I think, you know, again, considering this past 12 months and the experiences that our colleagues have had within their schools, because things have been restricted, I think as, you know, as a group of schools really acknowledging that as well and trying to look when it's safe to do so, but what opportunities have they missed out? Which bits of this year have they kind of been restricted to because of the restrictions, and how can we respond to that? So I think that's really important.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think going on to the wraparound and kind of sort of encompassing everything that we're trying to do, one of my favourite highlights of this year that we have done with our early career teachers has been, we've done an early career community Zoom, and that basically was built out of the fact that when historically our colleagues would have come into training rooms and would have been around the kettle having a conversation and saying, how are you managing this and what have you done with this, and just missing that kind of ability just to chat and say, this is how I'm doing, this is the idea I've got, and actually we have no specific agenda to those, and we just do one every half term, and people come with a cup of tea and we just open it up to how is everybody, tell us something that's made you laugh in the last term, tell us something that's been really difficult, and then where possible have somebody sort of an RQT giving their experience, and actually just the gold in those conversations of sharing where they're at and building that community that we've missed so much in the last year. We've already said this shouldn't be something just in response to lockdown and not being able to network, that actually that's something that we should continue in terms of building that conversation of how are you doing and what can I share.
That's absolutely spot on. That's exactly the kind of thing that I meant when I said sort of peer support networks. Exactly. Just the things that we're missing are those kind of corridor conversations, the water cooler conversations, the staff room conversations. So setting those up, and maybe next year when it might be possible to do some things physically, have a pizza together kind of thing. But the fact that it's so accessible remotely as well probably means that we should be holding on to some of the things that we've learned this year about what you can do effectively online. Absolutely, and they can support each other an awful lot, and you can be just there to sort of be the catalyst and the facilitator of that. Definitely.
Absolutely, that's great. And sort of final question, really, Sam, are there any particular areas of risk of vulnerability for our early career teachers that we should be aware of, and how as school leaders and mentors can we mitigate or support that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of touched on some of it already. Obviously we've talked about the importance of mentors, and they really are make or break, both in ITT and early career framework sort of territory. Potentially, a poor mentor can do a lot of damage. A great mentor can make all the difference as well. I think one of the things that we've learned through the pilot is it's great if schools can organise themselves to really think about, exactly the conversation that we've just had. Who are the best people to be the mentors? Get them ready to take on that role. We had a few examples in the pilot of people who suddenly found themselves as a mentor and they didn't know why, and they didn't even know what it was that their school had signed them up for. Ideally, avoiding that, because that doesn't kind of instill confidence in anybody when you find yourself in that back foot sort of situation. I think initially this year, I think there will be some starting up issues. I'm already aware anecdotally of one or two of our trainees who have gone for NQT interviews, and they've asked about the early career framework because obviously we're very up on it and talking to them about it, and then found themselves in the awkward position where the head teacher on the panel just kind of blanked because they hadn't really thought about it. Which is totally understandable, but a difficult situation to find yourself in as a trainee, and on the other end of that, on the interview panel as well. So I think I really recognise, God knows I'm so glad I'm not a school leader at the moment, because I've got so many things to think about, and it changes every day. But this is such a big, important thing that if you can just devote a little bit of your bandwidth to it right now, so that you have thought about it, you can cope when people ask you questions about it. You're thinking really carefully about the choices that you have in terms of how you make sure that legal entitlement that your NQTs that you're employing next year can access the early career framework. You've got a choice of providers, and you've got a choice of different ways that they can do it. And I think if I was a school leader, I would probably just send them on to one of the national programmes initially, at least, see how that feels. You have the option later on, if you want to create your own version using the resources. But I think initially, when you've got so many other things to think about, just be grateful that you've got that option there. Which hopefully will be a really high quality experience for the early career teachers, and maybe they can bring something back to the school that will be of value beyond just their own practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, familiarising yourselves with what the early career framework is. I mean, you know, as you say, at a later date, if people want to design something, you know, fair enough. But actually, I think, as you say, the you know, we've had experience with EDT in expansion this year, and it's been such a positive experience, and materials, portals, experience, training, everything that's encompassed that has been absolutely brilliant. So definitely an advocate for signing up to one of them in this crazy time. Well, there's lots to do. I think absolutely would recommend that.
Yeah, and you know, I think the materials, whether it's EDTs or any of the other providers, have potential value and application that can go beyond your early career teachers as well. I mean, mostly it will be familiar stuff that we all know, but it's I think you said earlier before we started recording, it is more structured, it's less random, it's just helping you think through, you know, what good looks like in a more structured way that I think many people will benefit from, and we will see reflected in the NPQs when they come on board as well. You know, the revision to the existing NPQs and the new ones, and particularly for purposes of this conversation, the specialist NPQ in leading teacher development, you know, are really well designed now to support that kind of golden thread, where you can see the coherence right through from ITT right all the way up to executive leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sam, it's been a total joy. I've heard lots of your conversations on webinars and different bits and pieces, and what absolutely oozes out of you is your passion and excitement and dedication for our early career teachers. So I'm really, really grateful for your time and your input and your wise counsel around how as schools and how as KYRA and schools across Lincolnshire can ensure that we are creating a culture where early career teachers are supported and looked after, and hopefully retained in this brilliant profession. So a huge thank you to you, Sam, for all of your time that you've given us today.
Absolute pleasure. And when the world opens up again, I'd love to come revisit. And
absolutely, we'd love you to do that. Colleagues, just to say, if the word early career framework is maybe making you have that blank face that we've spoken about today, there is information on our weekly bulletin. There's a video there about kind of what we know so far. We're having more updates from the DfE in spring. We will do another update to you, but please don't sit in silence and worry about this. Pick up the phone, give us an email. We can talk you through this and make sure that you're really prepared, ready for September. But as I think we've encompassed in today's session, we are excited and hopeful about the support that our early career teachers can get. Thanks so much for listening to KYRA Connect, and we'll see you at the next session.